Be noted.
Would the color guard please present the colors? Please stand.
City of White Bear Lake, the flag of your nation and the pledge to follow. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color detail. Post colors.
Thank you. It's always a privilege to bear witness to the color guard. There's no better way to open a meeting, so we thank you for that. All right, let's jump into the approval of the minutes. I trust everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from the regular City Council meeting on July 25th, 2023. If so, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes from July 25th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Item 3, adoption of the agenda. Are there any corrections or amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. Approval. I have a motion. Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda. Item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Item 5, visitors and presentations. Item A, employee recognition and swearing in of the police officers. Chief Swanson, where are you? Please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council, and thank you to our honor guard for being here today. I'm not sure if I'm going a little off agenda here, but I'm going to start with an employee recognition. We're here to honor several people tonight. We have a swearing in tonight, and there's a lot of things that will probably spark many different emotions in each of us. So it's a big agenda for police and fire tonight. So we're going to begin with recognizing a longtime police department volunteer employee who recently retired. And I would ask that Jim Kvitrud come up. I don't know where he was in the audience. If you could just come up and stand near me, Jim. Thank you. So Jim was not only a member of the White Bear Lake Police Department, but he's also a longtime proud resident of the city of White Bear Lake on our south end. Jim began his career with the department as a volunteer police reserve officer while he was still working full-time at 3M. And he became a reserve officer, he often said, because he was looking for a meaningful way to give back to his community. I think he quickly found that it became a second family for him when once he started that endeavor. He quickly became a familiar face in his uniform as he worked many high school football games, Manitou Days parades, 4th of July events, and Market Fest. Just want to pause on the high school football games. I did almost run Jim over at a football game and caused $4,000 in damage to a squad when I avoided running Jim over. So I had to throw the high school football games in there. While working these events and helping the officers on patrol, Jim was often training in new reserves or community service officers to teach them the ropes also. He served as a reserve officer for 18 years and volunteered over 3,811 hours during that time. When Jim retired from 3M, an opportunity presented itself in May 2009 for him to take on a bigger role with the police department, and he was offered a part-time position as a community service officer. He continued to serve in a very similar capacity as he had been as a reserve, and he was always willing to help out where he was needed. In addition to working the events, dodging people almost running him over, and helping on patrol, helping other departments throughout the city. He also maintained the police squad fleet and documented the hundreds of thousands of training hours for the police staff, the miles driven on squad cars, the amount of gallons of gas that we went through, and how much it was costing the city. His record keeping and attention to detail quickly became an asset to the police department and the city, particularly when we came to adopting budgets. And although we were really sad to see him decide to officially retire from all employment on June 6th of this year, we are excited for him as he embarks on his next chapter after serving the city of White Bear Lake for 18 years as a volunteer reserve officer and 14 years as a CSO. We had to wait, you can come on down, Ms. Crawford, but we had to wait until this meeting because he was pretty busy on family vacations in the meantime. So City Manager Lindy Crawford will present Jim with the City of White Bear Lake Bear Award for his many years of dedicated service.
Thank you all. It soon became a family, and I call these officers here my brothers and sisters. Other agencies, they're my cousins. That's how it felt like. And it was a very rewarding. I worked here, and I felt more rewarded here many days and nights than I did in my paid job at 3M. So I had an excellent time here. I miss my friends, coworkers, and I trust them, every one of them, with my life, because that's how it was. So thank you for the recognition.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears and honor our newest police officer as he officially takes his oath of office. I'm sure it's pretty nerve-wracking for him because it's a pretty darn full house for him to have to endure. So Lauren is up here in the front with his family. Officer Lauren Edmond began his police career with the White Bear Lake Police Department on April 17th of 2023. In these past few months, he's been really busy learning the city and the ins and outs of the city and everything about police work. Lauren grew up in St. Paul and graduated from Concordia Academy High School, although I just found out he was a student at St. Bernard's, which I was also. That's my alma mater. He says that family time and sports were a huge part of his life growing up, and he's grateful to his parents for setting him up for success that led to many life experiences, and these experiences molded him into who he is today. His parents and family should be very proud of him because he has molded himself into a very admirable person. Lauren chose a career in law enforcement because of the impact that community policing has and the opportunity for officers to play a role in changing and growing their community. He's been surrounded by many family members in law enforcement, and I think that that was very familiar to him as he grew up. Lauren has a passion for others and cares deeply for the success of the community, all of which make him a great fit for our police department. After high school, Lauren attended Century College, where our paths crossed again, where he earned a degree in law enforcement. While in college, Lauren also worked for the St. Paul Police Department as a community engagement cadet, and that experience will serve him very well in his role as a police officer. His fiancée, family, and friends join Lauren tonight, and he and Officer Sheik have a family connection. They are family, and he has selected Officer Sheik to pin his badge on, so I would ask both Lauren and Officer Sheik to come up, and then Callie will read the oath of office, and I have the badge.
I think we'll do a clear view and have you guys stand right in front of here. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name,
Lauren Edmund,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United
the
States
Constitution of the United States
and the state of Minnesota,
and the state of Minnesota,
and will discharge and faithfully execute
and will discharge and faithfully execute
the duties devolving upon me
the duties devolving upon me
as a police officer for the city of White Bear Lake
as a police officer for the city of White Bear Lake,
without fear or favor,
without fear or favor,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
You act like you've never done it before.
Not from this side.
Right, not from that angle.
She is so proud. I'm crying.
Congratulations. Okay, so lastly, we will be recognizing and honoring 4 police officers and 7 firefighters, EMS staff, for their heroic efforts earlier this year. So before we get started, I know they're not going to be happy, but I am going to ask them to come towards the front of the room so that you can see who we are recognizing. We have a very full house. So we have, from the police department, we have Officer Ryan Sheik, Sergeant Eric Gaboy, Officer Pomvalai Sorensen, and Officer Connor Dillon. And then from fire, we have Captain Matt Stallings, Lieutenant Steve Vober, firefighter paramedic Josh Cermak, firefighter paramedic Drew Gaboy, firefighter paramedic Jeremy Mock, firefighter paramedic Mitch Brown, and firefighter EMT Ben Ferderer. Wow, at least I'm covered. I'm well covered. All right. So this is a harder one to, hey, you got me. This is a harder one to go through just because, as I said, we've been very joyous and recognizing everybody's efforts and being sworn in to going to what has probably been one of the darkest days for the city of White Bear Lake and the White Bear Lake Police Department. Fortunately, we have a very happy ending. And I know that you were all sitting in this room on that night, and I was pretty darn far away trying to get a hold of you in this room once I got that phone call. But just, I'm going to give a high recap of what happened that night and then talk about what brings us here today. So on January 24th, 2023, around 8:30 p.m., officers responded to an apartment in the 3100 block of Carth Road to serve an arrest warrant for a subject that our police officers have had numerous contacts with in the past. So he's very well known to us. When officers arrived, the subject was uncooperative and shut himself in a bedroom and refused to come out. The officers on scene spent a great deal of time talking and negotiating with the subject to attempt to get him to come out of the room. This is not uncommon for any interaction that we've had with him, and standing to my left is Officer Sheik, who is a SWAT negotiator. So he has great experience with that and has always had a great rapport with the subject. The subject continued to yell at the officers. After several minutes, he suddenly opened the door and fired at the officers inside the apartment. Officer Sheik was struck by the gunfire and was critically injured. Officers fired back as they retreated from the apartment. And that was quite a bit of chaos because, as you can imagine, to have a gun go off inside an apartment and there's yelling and screaming and you're trying to get around furniture and get out in a hurry. So despite all of the emotions, chaos, and trauma that ensued, ensued, these officers remained calm and worked together to save their lives and avert any further tragedy. Even after being shot multiple times, Officer Sheik remained alert and talked to his partners, which kept everyone focused and helped them get out of the apartment quickly. Officers Dillon and Sorensen provided medical care to Officer Sheik outside the apartment door while he continued to talk and reassure them. Both are newer officers, and either the father or the field training officer or the senior officer took over, and Officer Sheik kept reassuring them and helping them so that they could all get out of there. Meanwhile, Sergeant Gadbois remained at the apartment door by himself, holding the perimeter and calling for additional resources while Officer Dillon and Sorensen brought Officer Sheik to safety and turned him over to the White Bear Lake firefighters and EMS staff. And when I talk about him calling in resources, we're talking it's about 30 seconds. He's calling for everyone to help, and he's calling a boss to tell him that there was a shooting. So, and yelling at the subject and trying to maintain that perimeter. Although their thoughts were with their injured partner, the 3 officers remained inside the building and held a perimeter until additional help arrived. So they delivered them to the firefighters and paramedics, and they ran back inside to continue to help Sergeant Gadbois. After a long standoff, the subject was safely taken into custody by the SWAT team. Although we know the inherent danger that police officers face every day, this call is one of the worst for anyone to hear come across the radio or a phone call to get. Now we see it on social media, and especially difficult for a spouse to get. This night was life-changing for all 4 of these officers, their families, the police department, and the firefighters. They went from a normal, ordinary workday, attending roll call and deciding what they were going to have for dinner, to suddenly in the fight for their life, to save their lives. Each of them walked away with a deeper bond with each other, a new perspective on the career and life. So despite the tragic events of that night, we are very thankful to have all 4 of them physically here and with us today. And at this point, I'm going to ask Chief Peterson to come up and just say a few words, and then I will go talk into the awards that they're receiving tonight. Stand right next to you.
Thank you, Chief Swanson. I just want to add on a few things. As Chief Swanson mentioned, it was quite a night. It's something that we hope would never happen. I want to add it was bitterly cold that night, too, so that didn't help anything at all. In perspective of what our firefighters did that night, they responded to this call, and it was kind of unsure what was really going on when they first arrived. When they got there were still shots being fired as they were being approached by the officers, with Officer Sheik, who was shot multiple times. So the firefighters met the officers, brought him into the ambulance, quickly treated and transported him down to a local trauma center, which worked out very, very well. After that, they stayed on scene and they worked with the SWAT team because, fortunately, the SWAT team was drilling that night, so there were a lot of SWAT people there in a big hurry. And so they stayed on scene with the SWAT team and helped with things on scene, such as getting the SWAT team equipment, ladders, forcible entry tools, also helping to control the utilities within the building. So to silence the alarm system and shut off the water and do other things. So they were in the building while this standoff was taking place. So they did a fabulous job at that and coordinating with police and fire. We love to give each other a hard time, but when it comes to stuff like this, it's all business and we just take care of each other. The last thing that was difficult for him was after the suspect was taken into custody, we also had to treat that gentleman and transport him. And he was very defiant. He kept threatening the officers while he was in the ambulance. And so the paramedics that were treating him, he was not pleasant to deal with, but their professionalism shined through in the fact that they treated him as nice and with respect as they could. They treated him as any other patient, and that's very, very difficult to do when a friend of yours just got shot. So I just wanted to point out what our involvement was there.
Thank you, Chief Peterson. One thing that I want to note, although he's not up here, but he is standing in the back, is Chief Peterson talked about SWAT coming. So this police team consists of Sergeant Gadbois, Officer Sheik, Officer Dillon, Officer Ponvalai, and also Officer Mark Barrel, who is on the SWAT team and was training. So can you imagine having something worse than getting a phone call that that you're typically with these people every night, 12 hours a night, and you're responding to help one of your best friends. So I don't want to minimize Mark's recognition as well. The police department has an awards policy that is intended to reward personnel for achieving or maintaining levels of performance which are consistent with the highest standards of the law enforcement profession. Although there are so many people in both the police and fire departments and neighboring agencies that played a huge role in this incident, it's very fitting that we are here to honor these 4 officers and the fire staff that treated Officer Sheik. So we have various awards to recognize the bravery of each of them, and I'm just going to highlight what they are for, starting with the firefighters. We have a life-saving award, which is awarded for action which, in disregard of personal safety or by prompt and alert action, results in the saving of the life of another person. This award is being given to Captain Matt Stallings, Lieutenant Steve Vober, firefighter paramedic Josh Cermak, Drew Gadboy, Jeremy Mock, Mitch Brown, and firefighter EMT Ben Ferderer. So they will all receive a life-saving award pin. Sadly, they're on back order because of whatever. We're still in a back order, so I'm really sorry, but you will be receiving them very shortly. The pin is a red and white pin that they can display on their uniform, noting their involvement in this situation. Next, we have the Medal of Honor, and that is awarded for outstanding heroism or bravery in circumstances beyond normal expectations of duty and at imminent personal hazard of the actor's life, with full knowledge of the risk involved and in keeping with the highest standards of the law enforcement profession. The Medal of Honor is being given to Sergeant Gadboy, Officer Dillon, and Officer Sorensen. And again, they will have a pin that is on their uniform, and it's a bar pin that will have the word honor on it. And again, I know that there is quite a definition for these awards, but I just want to note that none of them thought about the personal hazard of their life or the risk that was involved in it, because this is second nature for them, and they were just concerned about helping their partner. Lastly, we have the Medal of Valor. We have the Medal of Valor, which honors an act of bravery that demonstrates obvious self-sacrifice in the face of death or serious physical injury. Officer Sheik exemplifies this award. He suffered 3 gunshot wounds that evening, spent over a week in the hospital, has endured 6.5 months of surgeries, physical therapy, and healing. We are thrilled to report that he returned to work this week. And I will get into his award in a minute, but I want to just also recognize his wife, Amber, who is in the audience. It's been 6.5 months of her keeping the family together and her making sure that Ryan is taking it easy. I can't imagine that that was easy to do, but her strength and resilience is very admirable. I want to also recognize her involvement and thank her for always being there and worrying about everybody else in the department, everybody else in the team. She was there immediately, making sure that everybody else is okay when her life had just been changed drastically. So each person recognized here tonight will receive their pin noting their award that can be worn on their uniform. So please, before we get to that, I guess I do have one award here for Ryan. So this is the Medal of Valor. I'll show it here. So you will also have a pin that goes on your uniform. This is more of a display, Medal of Valor. So each person is going to get their pin, but I'd like to have everyone join me in honoring and thanking each of them for their bravery and their sacrifice as a result of that evening. So thank you. I think Ryan would like to say a few words before we wrap it up. So.
Well, I'll keep it short. I got a lot of people to thank, and I'll do that over time. Be impossible to thank everybody. So take this as a thank you to everybody. And if I don't get to you, thank you right now, if you can hear me. And love you for supporting me and my family. So, all right. First, so I want to say thank you to my wife for the obvious. She's a rock, so thank you to her for that. Thank you to my team, our team. I mean, I don't know what to say. It was a crappy situation. We worked together. Training kicked in. I am super proud and thankful for everybody that evening that was on my team, for how you acted and reacted and supported each other and just got the job done. And so thank you. To my buddies on the fire team, I've been meaning to get to you guys in a meeting and to thank you guys. That day's coming, but for now, just thank you. When I hit that ambulance, I mean, I like to joke around with you guys. I like to show up to medical calls. You guys know me. We're buddies. And as soon as I hit that ambulance, I know I had the A-team. And it was, honestly, it was really reassuring. And I don't know who called my wife, but thank you for doing that and just giving her a sense of reassurance and calmness that she needed until she got to the hospital. So thanks to the city, thanks to what you guys have done for my family and I, and our department and those that went on that journey with me that day. And, thanks to the community, if anybody from the community's here, it's just been just very, just overwhelming with the support that everybody's been giving us. And so thank you for that. And I hope this never happens again, but if it does, I know that we're going to handle it the same way and with a lot of care, consideration, support, and love for those that are going through it. And so everybody from my wife to myself to my teammates here to fire to the city, everybody did a great job. So thank you. Thank you very much. That's it.
Now we're going to go into Kate. Right, well, thank you for letting us have this time. And this was our first award ceremony in front of the council. I hope that we're not here for similar circumstances in the future, or they're not here for similar circumstances in the future, but I appreciate your support that you've given the department these last 6.5 months, and it's very appreciated. So with that, we will all leave to go have Kate. Oh,
No,
one more
thank you,
minute.
Chief. No,
Okay.
thank you. I just wanted to briefly say, on behalf of the council, that our officers and firefighters made us all very proud that night. We were all sitting here when that call came in, and it was uncharted territory for everyone on the council, and we were, I wouldn't say panicking, but didn't know what to do. And as an advisory policy board, there's not a lot we can do in these situations, and we defer to those that administer the duties and the job of administering the business of the city. So our city manager and our chiefs rallied together and did what they could do. And unfortunately, the council could kind of just sit back and offer well wishes and support. But the events of January 24th were a reminder to this council and to everyone just how dangerous your jobs are. So the things that we can control are how we allocate resources and how we support you. And I think I speak for the council that we will continue and want to renew our commitment to provide you folks with the necessary resources that you need to do your jobs. Our priority obviously is first and foremost to provide the best service to the residents of our community, but it's I think, always on our minds that our number 2 priority is to make sure that you folks go home to your family safely in the same way that anyone would want to do. So I just want to say thank you for your continued service and your heroism on that night, and renew our commitment to make sure that you folks have the resources you need to do your job as best you can and as safely as possible, and while mitigating the risk as best you can. So let's give our first responders one more round of applause. All right.
Thank you.
How am I going to be mean to Senator Gustafson after that?
Did you mute your mic on that, or did you just?
Up is bad.
All right.
How am I going to get you now?
All right, item 5C, legislative update. Senator Gustafson, please join us, and you have the unenviable task of following that, but I trust you'll do a fine job, so the podium is
Maybe I'll
yours.
come back a different time. That was very emotional. So thank you, Mayor, council members. It really is, it's good to be here. I know you've been following closely. I want to first say thank you to the city manager. You've just done an amazing job, and she's always been just so responsive, and you've just been a joy to work with. And I think like back and forth with the communication about what you need, and then being able to meet. And that goes to all of you. I think a few of you have reached out. If you have, and I missed your email, I'm so sorry. Please keep reaching out. I think you all have my cell phone numbers. Mayor, yours I got and put into my contacts, and your address populated into my calendar, so happy birthday. I see it's next week. I was looking at my calendar, I was like, well, happy birthday to the mayor of White Bear Lake. There he is. So anyways, it's good to be back home. It's good to be out of session and be back in the community again. I don't know what I can, I can run through all of the things. There are quite a few things, and we'd be here forever. So one of the things I just wanted to highlight, and I think is appropriate, is that I think what the mayor said about law enforcement is something that I agree with on every word of that. I've always had a good relationship with the law enforcement in our community. I continue to keep those lines open with the communication in all 9 cities, but especially obviously those that are in, that have police departments in my district. And I listen to them, and the message that you just said is pretty much what I have said to my caucus as well. This is important for us to support our law enforcement, and not just by words, but by money and policy and resources. And so we fought really hard to get that $300 million delivered to every city and every county. And new this year, I advocated that for every township over 10,000. So I think you know which one I'm talking about. But White Bear Lake got over $1 million, and then of course as being part of Ramsey County, which received over $6 million. That goes directly towards any public safety needs that you have. It is in local control. So as you sit there in your seats, it is up to you to make that big decision about where those dollars are best spent. I know that you all have really good relationships with law enforcement, fire, paramedics. So I trust that you will all make the right decision based on what White Bear Lake's needs are, but it is up to you to decide. So I had heard a couple of ideas of where the money would go, but again, you all do a really good job of being connected to the community. So I trust that you'll know what to do best with that. And I'm sure all of those men and women who are just here will have lots of opinions on where you could spend the money as well. So That being said, I am happy to talk about anything that, might concern you. I also don't know if if a question and answer is what you're looking for right now, but we are, I really did try to keep White Bear Lake and local control over some of the big projects that were coming down the pipeline in my mind at all times. We did take on, I believe I saw that cannabis was on your agenda tonight, and that was one that you were all very good about communicating with me on. I think I stood here during session and told you what my concerns with it were as well. I have checked in with White Bear Lake law enforcement just this past week during the Night to Unite and asked how it was going, and they were pretty open to say that they didn't have any concerns, that so far things were going well and that they weren't too worried, but, famous last words. So we'll just keep it in mind, but I will depend on you all to keep me updated if there are things that we can do in this next session to, change things if they need changing. But it is one of the things that I worked on, especially with the local control issue. Before my amendment, it was if somebody was selling or distributing cannabis illegally, it had to go through the state agency, which sort of seems silly to me because we would not handle an alcohol violation like that. We would call law enforcement and act appropriately and timely. So that amendment did pass and was included, and now local law enforcement has the ability to act immediately if necessary instead of having to go through a state agency, which seemed a little bit silly in the first place. Also, I was successful in getting the sales tax increased, because if we're all doing it, we should at least see some of those dollars spent in our own community. And so those were some of the successes that I had behind the scenes that made it to the floor. So happy to answer any other questions that you might have, but I know it's been a full night too, so I can come back another time, or you all, again, I think have my cell phone number, and I would encourage you to use it. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Senator. I'll open it up to the council if they have any questions. I just want to say thank you for showing up and just reporting and staying in touch.
Yeah.
I applaud you on your efforts to just stay engaged so that various levels of government are communicating. It's a relatively new thing for this council to have a legislative agenda, and I think that's good. That's good that we do that and we stay engaged in the state laws that affect local government. So thank you for just staying connected and being here tonight. And with that, council, do we have any questions for the senator? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if it's for the senator, and it's not related. It's related to something on the agenda, the lake level issue, the task force, or what are we calling it, the task force going forward. We have a representative on that task force. Is that, who appoints that? Have we done that? Yeah, I just don't think considering who's that going to be, and what's the thought process there?
Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, it is a very technical committee, so the city engineer will be attending that, and then I will be the alternate. They have not started meeting yet, but Met Council has started to get that rolling.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Senator Gustafson, for being here. I've seen you more than our previous in literally the last year than I had in 16 as I've been on the council. More importantly, you don't just show up. Whether I believe that you've achieved our goals, I believe that you were fighting for them, which is probably, that's all you can do. And I appreciate that. But I still want more.
As you should.
Yeah. And specifically I'm just trying to think which one I want to beat you over the head with first. No, I'm kidding. Really, the DMV. Why shouldn't we, and I don't want, I'm trying to figure out how to preface this. I want a DMV here. I want this here. I want people to come into our city hall. I want that service to be offered by our residents. Why shouldn't we shutter our doors if we continue to lose money like any other private business, or like the city of Maplewood, and make a decision tonight to close? And we're not doing this.
Don't say
Please,
that.
We're not doing this, press. But that's what they did. Staff, employees, jobs. No. I mean, we will fight for that. But that's what, communities are doing it because you guys aren't moving. This wasn't good enough. Wasn't good enough. And if the state wants to pay local municipalities or private businesses to do their job, we're going to have more and more problems. We're going to have longer and longer lines because places like the city of Maplewood are going to continue to do that. I'm not looking for a response. It's just like, this has got to change. Other legislators have to understand this. This is a service that is so important to everyone in the state. Identification, all the licensing that goes with it. With that, that's all I have. And I appreciate, though, that you were there and seeing the communication and seeing that happen. That meant a lot. So thank you for that effort. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else on the council have a thought or a question? All right. Well, thank you again for being here. We appreciate the update, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and staying in touch about what our mutual goals are.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Okay, item 6A, first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 1104 Tobacco and Related Products. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the city currently does not expressly regulate tobacco shops as a separate use in the zoning code. In addition, the city regulations for tobacco products need to be updated to keep pace with recent changes in both federal and state law. To address these areas, the City Council adopted an interim ordinance on September 27th, 2022, to authorize a study and impose a moratorium on the establishment or expansion of tobacco shops. So during that period of time, the city attorney, staff, and I have been studying current regulations and have prepared an amended ordinance language for tobacco, for tobacco licensure. For review and public comment. So tonight we are conducting a first reading and a public hearing for that ordinance. The ordinance is in your packet, and I will just highlight some of the I'll highlight some parts of the ordinance for you. So we updated definitions and have a new definition for tobacco product shop. As it relates to exclusive tobacco product shops, we are proposing a limit of 10 tobacco license in any given year in city limits for tobacco product shops exclusively. We've updated regulations to align with recent changes in both federal and state laws. And we've granted council authority to impose administrative penalties for violating state laws or local ordinances. I want to preface, this is not an ordinance that discusses zoning. We will discuss that later on tonight. So with that, I stand for questions for your first reading. If there are specific things that you want to address that you request us to bring back for the second reading, that's what we're looking for tonight.
All right, well, this being scheduled for a public hearing, I will open this up for a public hearing at this time if anyone would like to speak to this issue. And I'll note that I have no names on the sign-up sheet. Would anyone like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Council, thoughts or questions for Ms. Crawford on this? Yeah, I think that the silence is a reflection of Councilmember Hughes.
I do have one. I know we spoke about it, Mayor and members of the council. We spoke about it a little bit in the past, and so I just wanted to bring it forward because I'm actually going to talk about it on the next one as well. The limit on the maximum number of licenses issued by the city in any year. And I just want to, I guess, question again why we are limiting what is a legal business opportunity. Like, what is our reasoning for doing that? I don't really know who I'm asking that question of, except you and maybe ourselves. Why are we agreeing to that? Why are we doing that?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, it's just an idea at this point that we had discussed previously. It's, as I said, it's just in here right now. The city does have 6 exclusive tobacco shops. We have not had this as a use previously, so they've kind of plopped wherever as they could. So we did take a look and see, how frequently are these popping up, just so we had an idea. So we had our newest tobacco product shop open in June of 2022. Previously, October 2019. Then July 2018, September 2015, and then one before 2015 and one before 2005. So it's not very frequent, but again, just a suggestion.
Well, and I'll just echo
I'll
that,
try.
because we talked about it in our work sessions. I think the thinking was, well, one, we don't want to stifle any legal private business, but there was some public interest in making sure that we don't saturate one given thing. We don't want to be the destination with 40 tobacco shops. And because we had talked about it and decided, well, if there's 6, 10's a pretty good number because it allows plenty of flexibility, while at least codifying in our ordinance that, hey, there's a limit to this. And I think that speaks to any business for that matter. Well, would be the first to say I don't want to control what the private sector does. I think as a governing body, there's an interest in having a diversity of businesses. So I think that's really what that cap reflects more than anything. And then on a final note, an ordinance can always be amended. So if we deem it to be good public policy a few years from now that, hey, there's 10 shops and an 11th wants to come in, we can always amend that. So that's my thinking on why that cap is there, and I for one, like it. So, Councilmember Walsh, did you have a?
You said it perfect.
Okay. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I am in agreement with Councilmember Hughes. I can't envision why we had this conversation. We have had a conversation, a work study about the basis, and I respect that. It's like, I'm not going to fall on my sword for it. But as a matter of principle, I can't fathom that we would limit the number of auto dealers in the city of White Bear Lake. I can't imagine that we would limit the number of grocery stores. They're all legal. Let them fight it out in the marketplace under a standard. Most sectors, you would actually import dollars and jobs by being a destination. Again, there has to be a framework at the base of that says here is what's not reasonable, not fair, not healthy. But once you get to that level of what products do you have, where are you located, et cetera, philosophically, I'm not aligned with having a limit. Now, I will also say I will not be here at the second meeting and at our next meeting. So, Councilmember Hughes, if you want to see if you can push that back, I would probably support an amendment if you had one, but I'm not going to be here unless something changes in the scheduling process.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm, fine. I mean, I open it up, then we're not going to limit anything. Off sales liquor anywhere, any amount. Why do we limit that today? Why aren't you proposing to repeal those? How about liquor lounges? Let's have more liquor lounges. Why not? So if you want to play that game, I shouldn't say game, I'm getting excited. If you want to play it fairly. Open up all of our rules, bring forward the ordinances, and we'll change those also. So, I mean, if you want to do that, but at the same time, I don't want a liquor store every single corner. I don't want a smoke shop every single corner. I don't want a tobacco stop. I don't want a gas station. I don't want an auto dealer every single place I live and look. I think they can be reasonably mixed in. But I understand that from the aspect. But from the fairness, if you want to play the fair card, then we go back and we change everything that we have a limitation on, then I'll talk about it.
Yeah, I will just note a distinction is you can't buy a car at a gas station. You can buy tobacco products at any number of places that aren't a designated tobacco shop. That's a distinction, if it is about availability. But
Distinction or better difference.
all right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this certainly doesn't speak to the underlying policy issue that you're getting at, and the city manager mentioned this. But, I mean, keep in mind the limit is limited to tobacco product shop, which has a very high definition of 90+% of its proceeds coming from the sale. So these are not 80% tobacco shops. These are not 70% tobacco shops. These are 90+ tobacco shops. So these are kind of the top of the top as far as that is the product they sell. So just, there's certainly a lot of downstream flexibility there as far as selling of the product.
Mayor, do we have a limit right now on how many liquor stores we can have? mean, to Mr. Jones' point, is there an ordinance right now that we can only have 20 liquor stores? I mean, I understand that they would need to be zoned correctly, which gets to the next point.
Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, we do not have a limit on liquor stores.
In fairness to this exercise, I mean, we're going through it because it has been determined by this body that our ordinances need some updating. This is as much a housekeeping thing. So now's the time to have those opportunities. So it's a fair point that we don't do it in anything else yet, but we're also combing through all of our ordinances and trying to bring them into parity with what other cities are doing, what is now best practice, what is now. So those are fair points, Councilmember Edberg, but I'm open to having those conversations as we comb through and walk through other ordinances that are similar. So, Councilmember Hughes.
Oh, sorry, my only point here is that while I maybe don't want there to be tobacco sold on every single street corner, or in the next ordinance, cannabinoid products available on every single street corner, I don't know that I really feel like I should be able to say that when there's, you know, there were 3 oil and spice companies within a block that eventually went out of business. I guess what I'm saying is I don't really know that I'm in favor of using government ordinances to say I don't like something. I'd rather just say I don't like it. It feels like the wrong hammer.
Okay. Councilmember Jones.
Do we have an ordinance, Mr. City Attorney or City Manager, against XXX stores? They're legal, the products that they sell. I believe we do, otherwise we'd probably have one. So again, Ms. Hughes, I get it. That's on the docket to say, let's let that come in. And I'm just saying that's, you know, that's where it is. And by the way, great point about the olive oil stores, because man, that should have been severely governed. I mean, especially with the Stillwater one. Stillwater and olive oil store in downtown White Bear Lake. How did we allow that? I just look at our council and I blame
I think all of our
us.
downtown businesses are
Anyways,
excellent.
sorry, Mr. Mayor, I digress.
Chris, do you want to address the XXX question posed
So,
by Councilmember
Mr. Mayor
Jones?
and council, that is not a city licensed activity. Instead, it's regulated through zoning, which is restrictive zoning, but it still has to allow First Amendment activities. And so it's usually addressed through zoning rather than any sort of cap on the number of licenses or anything like that.
Councilmember Walsh.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, since the discussion has gone on this long, we are a small town board representing our neighbors. We absolutely can bring to this table decisions about, you know, the values of the community, and we can absolutely bring it to bear on some of the issues that Councilmember Jones talked about. Items that are unhealthy, have been heavily regulated throughout the history of this country, like alcohol, tobacco, that have behavior modifying. That's why they were. We can absolutely make decisions like that as a board about what the mix is and the balance is in the community. So I think it's our job, and I think I have no problem, you know, especially with a limit like 10, because that's a lot. And we took into account that we have 6 now. There's some room for growth. So I don't know. I think it's absolutely in our purview to represent the community and the values of the community and what the vision is for the balance and mix of retail. You know, olive oil isn't the same as alcohol or tobacco or a sex shop. Absolutely not. They're different. They're absolutely different. So I think we can react differently representing the city. Thank you.
Well, this is the first reading. Any other thoughts or glaring issues that we have with this? Can't wait for the next council meeting. Any other thoughts on this?
A twofer, I think.
So with, Mayor, with the, I don't know if there is a consensus, so staff is not going to make any change to this ordinance, and we will bring back the same ordinance for the second reading and for consideration of adoption on August 22nd.
Very good. All right, item 6B, first reading of an ordinance requiring licensing and imposing regulations on the sale of edible cannabinoid products. Is this you, Ms. Crawford?
It is. Mayor, members of the council, I am going to go through a history because our next 2 items do discuss cannabis. So on July 1st, 2022, it became legal for businesses to sell certain products containing Delta-9 THC in Minnesota. The authorizing legislation did not address local regulation on the sale, and there was uncertainty, still is, of the local government's scope of authority and whether interim ordinances authorizing, whether additional local regulations needed consideration. So therefore, on September 27th, 2022, the City Council approved an interim ordinance authorizing a study and imposing a moratorium on the sale of cannabis products. During the 2023 legislative session, the Minnesota legislature enacted a comprehensive legislation relating to the legalization of cannabis, including but not limited to the establishment of the Office of Cannabis Management. It allows for a local moratorium on full cannabis retailers until January 1, 2025. The City Council did adopt a moratorium on cannabis retailers until January 1, 2025. Requires local registration, adopts reasonable restrictions, zoning regulations, which is what we'll get into next in the next agenda item. Limits the number of cannabis businesses based on the population of the community. It's one for every 12,500 persons. So for White Bear Lake, that is 2. And to allow for buffers, 1,000 feet of a school and 500 feet of a daycare residential treatment facility, a public park regularly used by minors. So once OCM is established, they will be the regulatory authority for licensing cannabis businesses and the sale of cannabinoid products. Our moratorium for the sale of cannabis products is approaching the end of its 12-month term, and until the OCM begins licensing the sale of lower potency hemp products or edibles, there will not be any regulatory authority overseeing the sale of those products in the city of White Bear Lake. Therefore, a short-term issue requiring city consideration whether or not to establish a licensing system of lower potency hemp edibles is up for discussion. So at the direction of the City Council during a work session in June, the city attorney and staff prepared an ordinance establishing a licensing structure, a temporary licensing structure, for the sale of edibles and regulating the sale of edibles until OCM takes over licensing products. So highlights of the ordinance attached in your packet for tonight's first reading. We created applicable definitions, eligible and ineligible license qualifications, and application procedure. The products must be stored in areas not freely accessible to customers and the general public. An application period for this license is consistent with all of the other business licenses in the city. Sales are only allowed to persons 21 years or older. The ordinance allows for compliance checks, revocation, or suspension of a license. Licensing decisions rest with the City Council, just as tobacco licenses do. And the ordinance in front of you terminates and will no longer be effective once edible or low-potency hemp products are licensed through OCM. So those are the highlights. Again, we're here tonight for a first reading. The second reading we're here for first reading and public hearing. The second reading of the ordinance and potential adoption is scheduled for August 22nd. Thank you.
All right, this being scheduled for a public hearing, I will open up the public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak to this issue, and I will note for the record that I do not have any names on the sign-up sheet. Would anyone like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Council, do we have any questions for Ms. Crawford? Issues? Initial thoughts? Councilmember Jones.
I came to the realization after, we've been talking about this ad nauseum. I don't want to talk about it anymore, but we have to. But more and more, I want to trust in my staff and our city attorney, because they're the ones that are going to have to carry this out. And I'm forcing myself literally to read the small print and dig into this, and I can't, because it's just, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And with what the state has or has not done, I think at this point where we are today, Mr. Mayor, we need to trust our staff and move forward with what their recommendation is. So when that happens, that's the way I'm feeling about it, because it's getting too complicated on a lot of levels, and the state certainly isn't helping. Thank you.
Anyone else have a thought? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Crawford, there may be just some nuance or semantics in the language, but you referred to the state statute as placing limits on the number, and you identified in your slide 2 per 12,500. My recollection is that that does not impose a limit, a maximum, but can you speak to that? Because I'm not seeing anything in my reading, and I just glanced through it again. I didn't see anything where we impose a limitation on that number, but would you speak to that and clarify what's here and what's in state law?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, I should have clarified on my slide. That is regarding a cannabis retail business, so if you will, an exclusive cannabis product shop, just like an exclusive tobacco product shop. What we're talking about in this ordinance is related to the low potency. So the products that can be sold at gas stations or liquor stores, et cetera. So the limit of the 2 based on population is an exclusive cannabis product shop, which is not allowed until 2025. We are not proposing a limit on the number of low potency license, if you will. We are saying those that are eligible are those businesses that already hold a tobacco or an on or off sale license, a liquor license right now.
And so if I could clarify, Mr. Mayor, so the issue that the statute speaks to is not in front of us tonight. That's a future conversation. Is that correct?
So we placed a moratorium on cannabis retailers until January 1, 2025. That is not before us. That will not be before you because those businesses will be regulated by the state, by the Office of Cannabis Management. So what will happen is if I want to open a dispensary as a private business, I will contact the state. The state will contact the city and check with our zoning regulations and see, Lindy wants to go here. Can she go here? We say yes or no based on a zoning ordinance that we have not discussed yet. And then it goes back to the state, and that's the only local control that we have. Once we have 2, we could say we have met our quota. We are not, but that's up to the state.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Walsh.
since we're on this topic, what's the population of the city of White Bear Lake? We got an email not too long ago from the Met Council that said it was 24,600. So I don't understand why we keep putting 2 up there. Under this ordinance, it would be 1 per 12,500. So until we hit 25,000, it's 1. I get it. We're going to build an apartment building, and there'll be 400 people there. But go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, just to clarify, so what you're talking about as far as limits and how you count and all that, those are definitely policy decisions that will be coming before this council, before the moratorium you adopted expires. But those decisions are not before you tonight.
Oh, I understand. Yep. I understand, but the slide says 2, and it's starting to annoy me because we've been using 2 when it should be 1. I get it. It's really close, but it's 1 until it's 2. That's all.
So I just wanted to make it clear that, yes.
I know.
Yep.
I know we're not talking about that tonight, but it's
Okay.
up there, so I thought I'd point it out.
So as long as you brought that up, maybe our city attorney, if you can, maybe it's not clarified, what is the official source that we go to look to define the population? Is it the U.S. Census, or what are we looking at to establish that number? Because I'm with Councilmember Walsh, we're sub 25,000. That is fact, that is reality as it stands today.
And I don't have the
It's not defined
language
in the law.
up. If it's not, so we always look to, of course, to the language of the statute. And sometimes it says to the decennial census, sometimes it says to the most recent demographer's estimate. We have, potentially both. If it doesn't indicate, I guess I would be inclined to look at demographer's estimate, but the rules may flush that out once they're made.
I'm sorry. That's my guess. I think the law is silent. I looked for that. So I'm guessing the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, will probably promulgate rules. So we'll wait for that. It might in fact be 2 by the time they're done. But at the moment, according to the law, to the language, it should be 1.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
It's not a big deal, but it just annoys me.
Member Walsh, the reason we have been saying 2 is everything that we have researched to date, including mine, the city clerk, city attorney, League of Minnesota Cities has been saying if you're ever over to 12,500, that triggers that second one. As the city attorney said, it will be flushed out prior to 2025, but it is not what we are talking about tonight.
I know, but that
Well,
doesn't-
yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, in fairness, without getting too deep in the weeds, that's why we passed a moratorium, because there's a whole lot of unanswered questions, and we'll just chalk this up to yet another thing that the legislature didn't clarify and left local government and businesses and everyone else just kind of sitting here scratching our head. And oh, by the by, it's legal to, possess and smoke this stuff as of like last week. So thanks for that. We appreciate that. That's great. We'll just figure it out for the next year and a half. Okay. Any other thoughts on item 6B, the first reading of an ordinance requiring license and imposing regulations on the sale of edible cannabinoid products? We will take this up again at the next council meeting. Item 7, we have nothing scheduled. Item 8A, first reading of an ordinance amending zoning regulations regarding tobacco and cannabis uses. Is this Mr. Lindahl?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you mentioned, the next item on your agenda is related to the last two in that it addresses zoning, a zoning ordinance text amendment related to tobacco shops and cannabis retailers. So just a quick way of background again, this item was initiated by staff after direction from the City Council to take this item up. It does propose to create two new uses in the zoning code, the first one being tobacco product shops, the second being cannabis retailers, and those items are defined in the ordinance that's in your packet. It proposes to assign them, or these two uses, to the B4 General Business District. The Planning Commission did hold the required public hearing for zoning ordinance text amendments back at their meeting on July 31st. That item was noticed properly through the paper following the standard procedure. And to date, either before the Planning Commissioning or up to date, staff has not received any comments about the proposed ordinance that's before you tonight. With the item that's before you tonight, both the Planning Commission and staff are recommending approval. So just by way of a reminder here, there are 6 criteria that staff analyzes when considering any zoning ordinance text amendment. There's a detailed analysis of these 6 findings within your staff report, and I'm happy to go over any of those in more detail if you like. The takeaway I would offer the council is that the analysis looking at the comprehensive plan for guidance on new commercial uses or taking a look at compatibility with present and future land uses, cause staff to look through our standards and consider each of the individual commercial zoning districts for where these uses should be located. Part of that analysis included looking at where our current tobacco shops are located throughout the community. And looking at analyzing the 6 current ones we have, there really is, and the fact in the context that those uses located in the community without any zoning parameters, standards, guidelines, the private market decided where these were going to go. And so looking at that from a perspective of, did the market guide these uses to any particular zoning district? We did not find that. They are located basically throughout the B3 to B5 zoning districts, fairly uniformly. But looking at the guidance and definitions for the zoning, the guidance in the comp plan and of the land uses and the descriptions of the purposes and intent statements that go along with each zoning district, staff came to the conclusion that the B4 district was the most appropriate district to locate them in. So the proposed standards, again, would create those 2 new use types, or use definitions, tobacco product shops and cannabis retailers, assign them to the B4 General Business District, subject to the same zoning standards for height, setbacks, parking requirements for any other commercial business that would be in the B4 district. So they're treated just like any other use in that district from a performance standards development standards perspective. And then it would also apply the state recommended buffers in the state statute that the city manager just talked about a few in the last two items. And that would be applying a 1,000-foot buffer from schools and a 500-foot buffer from daycares, residential treatment facilities, and public park facilities regularly used by minors. So on this same slide to the right of it, you see a copy of the city's zoning maps with blue buffers around the uses that are included in that in those buffer definitions that I just spoke about. So that then guides us as to what properties are left over in the community that could be eligible for a tobacco product shop or a cannabis retailer. Taking a look at how that impacts kind of current conditions in throughout the community. Again, we have the 6 existing tobacco product shops, and because none of them are located in the B4 district and outside of the buffers, they would all be considered legal nonconforming. They existed legally before the proposed uses would be put into place, and so they are what's commonly referred to as grandfathered in. They're allowed to continue under state statute to be maintained, repaired, even replaced. They just aren't allowed to expand. In a situation where they would cease operations for more than a year, then their grandfathering status can go away. Okay? It's also important to note that their grandfathering status can be transferred to another owner. So it doesn't stay with that owner. They have the ability to sell the business to another party, and that continues in perpetuity. Okay? They would remain subject to licensing requirements that we were just speaking about before. The low-potency hemp product sales would become permitted subject to the new zoning laws or standards that we're considering before you tonight. And as the city manager offered in the last 2 items, full cannabis businesses and retailers would remain prohibited under the moratorium that the city has in place until January of '25. So, as I mentioned, the Planning Commission held the public hearing related to this item at their meeting last week and raised, I think, some good questions and had some good discussions about the zoning aspects of this. And so one of the questions that was brought up by the Planning Commission is, does the city's sports center, the ice arena, qualify under what the statute defines as a park? And in looking over the definition that's in state statute and in consultation with the city attorney, it does qualify because it's a city-owned facility that is regularly used by minors. So the map that's on this screen and included in your packet originally did not include the sports center, which you see marked, I hope you can kind of see in the upper kind of midpoint on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a fairly large red arrow. That indicates the location of the sports center, and so we've added that as another buffer, and that does exclude some of the commercial category in the B4 that was originally shown on the map to be included at the Planning Commission level. Generally, you can think about that area, if you can think about it in your mind, as the Birch Lake Shopping Center area, okay? The second question that the Planning Commission raised was they wanted to just generally reaffirm the zoning districts that we were proposing to place these uses in. And again, that's the B4 as we've been talking about tonight. They also had concerns about the non-conforming tobacco shops and whether that they could be allowed to continue. So again, as we've talked about, they are grandfathered in, subject and always subject to state law related to grandfathered uses, and again could be repaired, maintained, even replaced, just couldn't continue after a year. Thirdly, they fourth, they looked at, can the existing tobacco shop sell cannabis and/or low potency hemp products. And so we did go back and look at this and have further discussion between staff and the city attorney. And so what we have as an answer for you before that tonight is, under the original draft ordinance that went to the Planning Commission, the answer would be no. That original ordinance had two uses defined in it: tobacco product shop and cannabis businesses. And so it treated all cannabis businesses, whether they were selling full-blown cannabis products or low-potency products, the same, okay? So, but as an alternative, staff has also included in your packet a second draft ordinance that would add a third use and separate the cannabis retailers, full-blown cannabis retailers, from low-potency or edible cannabis types of retailers. And so that staff is looking for, happy to answer questions, have a discussion, looking for feedback on that difference.
I will just add, thank you, Mr. Lindahl. In your packet, the option A, if you will, or the original ordinance is dated 7/27/23, and immediately after that, the second ordinance is dated, I believe, 8/1. So that is up in the header. That's where you're going to find the difference.
Mr. Lindahl, I'm not sure I totally followed that, so can you just flesh out what the practical distinction is between the two drafts?
Troy, our city attorney, would you like to take that?
I'd be happy to jump in, Mr. Mayor and council. I think it really boils down to, originally lumped all THC products into cannabis businesses and treated them the same and applied the, I'm going to call them setbacks, the setbacks that are allowed. When you look at that, that's really limiting on the full scope, including the edibles. And so the second draft, the option B, breaks out the edibles. And allows edible businesses within any commercial district within the city. It keeps cannabis businesses, the kind of the full-blown cannabis, to the restrictions, the setback restrictions on that. So it really, that's the primary distinction. It allows the edible cannabinoids to be really in any commercial. And then with the licensing ordinance you just looked at, not any, but there's the commercial districts. It allows anyone that has a tobacco or liquor license then to sell, regardless of whether they're in the B4 or the other commercial district. So it treats them more flexible? I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. But there's certainly more flexibility being given to the edible cannabinoid products under the option B.
Okay, so just so I have that clear in my mind, the first draft, which is more restrictive, would only allow the low-potency edibles to be sold at a place that had a full cannabis license. Is that a true statement so far?
Actually, it treats them the same as a full-blown cannabis shop. So
right, so that you couldn't, right. So you would you'd need to have a full cannabis license in order to sell a cannabinoid.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It lumps them together from a zoning perspective. So whether you're selling gummies or the full-blown cannabis, you're being lumped under the same heading and are restricted to B4 and subject to the setbacks.
Correct.
Okay.
Under option B, cannabinoid, the edibles are broken out. So we still have the B4 and setback restrictions on cannabis businesses minus the edibles. The edibles are carved out and allowed to occur with a city license for the next year and a half in any of the commercial districts.
So then
without the setbacks.
Okay. So then the policy question for the board is, do we care, or do we have a public policy interest in being more liberal, if you will, in terms of where cannabinoids are sold, or do we want to make them as restrictive as cannabis? Councilmember Jones.
So I don't have an answer to that. I have a question for staff on the two versions. Really, what's the easiest one to enforce? What's easiest for staff to control, enforce?
Mayor, Councilmember Jones, I would say option B would be easier. We have, over the last year, or however many months it's been, the city manager's office has been working with tobacco product shops who have been, most have been in compliance and have been asking, when can I sell this? I'll be completely honest with you. It wasn't my intention to bring you an ordinance that would prohibit low potency hemp products to only be sold in a B4 zoning district. I relate it to 3-2 beer, who would, could technically, I mean, if they had the proper license, be sold in a Quick Trip, like they are now, some of them, versus an exclusive store. So it's like Quick Trip selling cigarettes versus a tobacco shop. It wasn't my intention. That is where we started, and Planning Commission caught that, so we reevaluated.
And that one point in the 8-123 draft is under Article 2, Subdivision 3, edible cannabinoid business. Is that the call-out that kind of gives that flexibility within the zoning?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, the definition of, right, so edible cannabinoid business is broken out as an independent use. And then if you scroll down under, subdivision 3, then it calls edible cannabinoid businesses as being a permitted use within any commercial district.
Well,
And it
that's
also
really
does not,
the difference between the two.
and it does not subject them to the setbacks that apply to
And I
cannabis.
scrolled and nothing happened, so I turned the page.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, when we're talking about the cannabis businesses in here, I mean, this is definitely a forward-looking ordinance, because, as was mentioned, these can't happen right now. I am convinced there's going to be a gap between the end of your moratorium and when there's licensing of these things, and even the zoning guidance and that sort of thing. I'm becoming more and more skeptical as time moves on that things are going to be ready to go. And so this is anticipatory in the sense that we're trying to create some understanding of where these can go, but fully understanding that when the state comes out with its rules and guidance, this is going to come back before you. So when it comes to the cannabis businesses and the zoning of this, you will see more of this down the line. But this is attempting to at least create a baseline from which to work on moving forward. So,
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, just on that topic, because that's my question. When I gotta say this right. If we go with this ability to choose between no and yes up there in the thing, is that going to continue after the state, that takes over sort of control of the edible piece? This is a temporary, well, I mean, this is zoning, this is not temporary, but our temporary ability to sort of, I guess maybe I'm answering my own question. Well, no, because this is more than zoning. When you say an allowable use within a tobacco license or an off-sale, that's a little bit more than zoning, isn't it? My question is are we going to lose control of that decision anyway later? And so is it smart? That's my decision making is like if I can say no forever, maybe I'd say no forever. If I can say no for only 18 months, and then the state takes over, and the liquor stores and tobacco shops are going to be able to sell these low potency edibles, then I'm not interested in having sort of a temporary thing there. That's my question. If that was clear.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, this is really, I mean, it's temporary in the sense that we will have to amend it, I'm sure, once the state gets into this. But this isn't taking away, when the state kicks in, you still have zoning authority. So unlike the licensing of edibles, you will still, every indication is you will still have zoning authority over these.
But is it a zoning question to say you can't sell edibles? Well, that's not a zoning question the way I read that, allowing low potency hemp products with tobacco or on-sale liquor licenses. That's sort of if you have a tobacco license or an on-sale liquor license, off-sale liquor license, you can sell edibles. That's not zoning.
Well, I think, hang on, the zoning question is you have to have both. You have to both have your tobacco license and be within wherever we zone for where it's allowed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, with that provided language, it is really meant to line up with the licensing ordinance that's going through at the same time. So we want to create an expectation that you could have an edible business somewhere, it's permitted anywhere. But then we have this licensing saying, but it's limited. So this is really trying to create a level in how we treat that. Now, does that language perhaps come out when we adopt a full-blown zoning ordinance on this? Maybe.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions, well, a comment and a question. So I'm inclined to support the alternative B language to deal with the low potency. I think that makes sense. So I'll just leave that there. The question that I have is, I'm looking at the map. It's really well done, and I appreciate the thought and coloration that went into it. I do find, okay, my old eyes are having trouble distinguishing between which shade of maroon, magenta, or something else that might be called red. And I'm having a little trouble in the smaller detail picturing out exactly which is which. As I look at it, the recommendation for the B4 does not, clearly does not include the central business district, where I think we have one entity that is likely to want to. I'm trying to picture why we don't have the central business district identified. My reading of the map is that it does not have any of the buffered areas, but I could be misreading. And so it's like, why is that one not? Why is that one excluded from the options?
I have a quick ask on that. It actually goes to your question.
Can you use your mic?
My mic. I just have a quick ask that I think goes to that. Is the library a public park under the same definition of the sports center?
No, it's not.
Why not?
A public library does not meet the state's definition. It's not a park.
Okay,
Just
but it
like
is
City Hall.
primarily used by, I mean, it is used by an entity regularly used by minors. And if it's not included on there, can we include it?
So, Mr. Mayor.
Please, Mr. Gilchrist.
Okay. So the public park aspect of this is not entirely clear. A local unit of government may prohibit the operation of a cannabis business within 1,000 feet of a school, 500 feet of a daycare, residential treatment facility, or an attraction within a public park that is regularly used by minors, including playgrounds or athletic fields. So the definitions that you see in this ordinance, I came up with them to try to capture that. Now, if the rules come out and provide further clarification on what those definitions ought to be, then we'll have to change them. But for now, this is the best attempt to fill in some blanks here. I don't think a library would fairly fall in unless it's attached to a school or something like that.
So I think, Mr. Lindahl, if you could address Mr.
I
Edberg.
just was going to cut off part of the
No.
area
Okay.
down there.
So having established that, I think Councilmember Edberg's question is the downtown district, and I think Mr. Lindahl, you had an answer for him on that.
Mayor, members of the council, if I understand your question is, why doesn't staff's recommendation include the downtown central business district, essentially? So, excuse me. So as I mentioned, what we did is we looked through the comprehensive plan for guidance, and then we looked at the definitions of how the zoning districts are supposed to work and the uses that they're supposed to include, okay? And so given the information that was in there, we focused in on the B4 district. And that answer that recommendation that we're providing you is in the context of the full-blown hemp products and low potency products being together. In the recommendation, or excuse me, in the option B ordinance, low potency products are separated out, as the city attorney has talked about. And so you could, a business that has a current tobacco license or an off-sale or an on-sale liquor license, regardless of their zoning, they need to be in a commercial zone, but otherwise the B4 restriction doesn't apply to the low potency products and would therefore not apply to the downtown business should they come in and ask to sell low-potency products.
Got it. So it's the other part of that quadrant that is not addressed. Why would we, what is the rationale for not permitting a full-blown cannabis product in the downtown business district where we have all kinds of other businesses? And at least as I look at the map, it doesn't fall into any of the buffer areas that would be excluded by statute. So it's being excluded by our policy. What's the policy reason for that?
So, Mayor, members of the council, the process that staff went through to look at this and the recommendation that we brought forward to you, again, based on the analysis of the comp plan and the zones, looked at the general business district as the district that provides for regional related uses on higher capacity roads. And seeing as these, that staff looked at these proposed uses as they are before you tonight as not just serving a local market, but a broader regional, maybe, East Metro market, and chose to, and with that rationale, is recommending the B4 district.
Okay. I don't find that a very plausible kind of explanation, but that's fine. It's like we handle umpteen thousand people for Market Fest. We handle a whole bunch of folks and high-level traffic in our downtown area. We actually want that. We have so much of it that we had 3 spice oil and olive oil companies, all right? So I'm not, that persuasion doesn't work on me. If there's a better reason, bring it forth, but I don't find that to be a very compelling analysis.
Mayor, members of the council, if I would just add one more thing that I neglected to mention is, we also looked at these similar, and we certainly, staff is open to feedback about this, but we had originally thought we had heard a perspective from the council that you were interested in looking at regulating these similarly to how we regulate liquor stores or the sale of liquor. And so if you look at the zoning code does not allow off-sale liquor establishments in downtown currently.
There is one, but it's not.
I was going to say, excuse me, but Catronio, it's like...
There is one, and excuse me, Mayor, members of the council, there is one that predates the code.
There's 2 of them.
Yeah, so we've already got it.
So they would be grandfathered in. The liquor store is grandfathered in as a legal non-conforming use, and they operate to this day similar to what staff is suggesting that the proposed tobacco stores could do.
You just want to come down here and buy before you come. Just teasing you. Just teasing.
Okay. Well, this being a first reading, are there any other comments, proposed amendments? All right.
I will say my.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to interrupt you. My only comment is going to go back to my other one. I find this a really useful way to say to companies, or to say, I like open license, but limited sales points, I guess, to bring my entire discussion of the evening to a close. I don't like limiting how much of something could be done, but I do want to be able to say, but you can't do it here. So that's it.
So is that all by way of saying you support the B4 zoning structure that was laid out in the proposed ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Edberg.
So I've noted that are we going to act on this at our next council meeting, or, because this is a topic that I have a voice in, and can we reschedule? I will not be here in 2 weeks.
I'll defer to city staff. I'm sure there's some timing requirements, but I don't want to stop any council member who just doesn't happen to be available from weighing in on the policy decision. So, Ms. Crawford, what options? Or Mr. Lindahl?
Mayor, members of the city council, so there isn't a 60-day application process that should concern the council in this case, because this is a staff-initiated item. So there isn't an applicant waiting on this. The only other thing to consider would be the existing moratorium that would expire at the end of September.
Mayor, if I may, you can push it. The next meeting after August 22nd is September 12. That's the last time that we would want to push this to, because that moratorium does expire September 27th. Well, and that, yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Walsh.
Well, I'm actually in favor of pushing it because I think this is a really important question that you raised, and I'm not exactly sure where we should come down. I think it's a good discussion we should have. I mean, maybe the central business district should be the place for these types of locations. You know, if you think about, you know, that's where the businesses are. That's I'm not articulating this very well, but if you think about different parts of our city that are, I shouldn't say more buffered by neighborhoods. There's certainly a neighborhood in downtown White Bear Lake, right between the lake and the city. But I guess I see it. You really have got me thinking, I guess, on this discussion of the B4. Should it just be exclusively B4, or should we flip it and make it exclusively something else? So I think it merits further discussion, which means let's make sure you're here, I guess, is what I'm articulating.
Well, and I think moving it to September, quite frankly, now that I'm fully wrapping my head around this, gives members of the community an opportunity to engage with us. It's their downtown. What are they looking for? So that extra time is only helpful. I've got no problem with that. I don't think we need any official action. We're just going to not calendar it, and we'll put it on the first meeting in September agenda. Anybody have any objection to that? Anybody just dying to move forward in 2 weeks? Okay. So we will have the second reading and really take this issue up at the first council meeting in September.
Mr. Ray?
Mr. Gilchrist.
Just for clarity, we're moving forward with option B then?
Do we need to make a decision on that right now, or can we move forward with?
I would recommend that you do.
Okay. Well, Council, what would we like to do? Where are we leaning? Councilmember Jones.
I'll just start off. I support option B, going back to what City Manager Crawford recommended.
So my only issue on that is because we're talking about having a conversation expanding it from B4 to possibly B5 or other areas. To me, that changes the analysis on whether or not we want to be a little more expansive with the low potency. So I don't know if I can weigh in and say, well, I'd be in favor of option B. If it was B4 with everything, I've got no problem with option B. That makes sense. They're two different things. But if we're going to expand the cannabis products, which then the low potency will piggyback off of, then that makes more of a compelling argument for option A, if that makes any sense to anybody at all. So maybe, Mr. Gilchrist, can you clarify, why can't we just move forward with option A and option B and then really take up that in substance at the second reading?
So, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I apologize, and Council, I apologize. It's cleaner, frankly, to move forward with one. And the reason you have two before you is just because, frankly, it was my recommendation, since A was the one that went through the hearing, that you should have that before you, and B does make significant changes, so I thought it'd be best to have both before you. Now, if the council is of consensus to move both forward, I'm not saying you can't do that. You certainly can. It's just, we'd have to obviously keep track of one's A, one's B, why we're moving them forward, both of them. But you can do it if that's the council's pleasure.
Okay. Is anyone else on the council understanding where I'm coming from, that one kind of begets the other? If we're talking about expanding the zoning in general, then that changes whether option A or option B. Councilmember Edberg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So of the two issues that we're wrestling with, the option B is of greater importance to me than the conversation about whether it's B4 and or B5, how we define that. So I think it makes more sense to regulate the low potency differently than what is proposed under the current version A. So that's why but your argument and this whole conversation just highlights how many cross-cutting and, these are not simple, straightforward conversations, and maps help, but they are perfect either. They don't clarify everything. So I think there's a whole lot of legitimate, how do we think about this, and is there a shared way that we think about it? So I want to acknowledge that this is not a straightforward A and B.
So then I would suggest that unless there's a legal reason not to move forward with the second reading and having option A and B on the table, then we do just that, and we'll take up the issue. Our city clerk, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, just to provide more clarity on what we're talking about between the difference of option A and option B, and just to keep it in simple terms, if a bar or restaurant comes to us and says that they would be interested in providing an offering of a THC seltzer, option A, because it is broad and more restrictive, would not allow, I think, most of our bars and restaurants from doing so. So option B is opening it up for more flexibility so that, because we're not just talking about edibles, we're talking about beverages. Option A would be more restrictive and would prevent any of our liquor establishments from selling these products. Option B provides more flexibility on where these lower potency edibles and beverages can be sold.
I appreciate that clarification. I think I do understand that. I'm just not sold yet from a public policy standpoint whether that's where we want to go. Maybe we do. I just want to have the conversation more extensively and flesh it out. So I appreciate that distinction. That's helpful. So anybody object to moving forward with option A and B, and we'll take this up in a more substantive fashion at the second reading in September. All right.
Can the library actually sell edibles in the future?
No, but you can check them out if you have a valid library card.
All right, item 8B, review of burger bar liquor license violations. I believe Ms. Longendijk, you're taking this? Nope, Ms. Crawford.
Mayor, members of the council, so the police department conducts alcohol compliance checks every year at all of our licenses establishments. The Burger Bar did fail 2 compliance checks, one on August 18, 2022 and June 21st, 2023, due to serving alcoholic beverages to underage buyers. The second failed compliance check also involved an underage employee serving the alcohol to an underage buyer. Per Minnesota state statutes, it is illegal for any person to sell alcoholic beverages to a person under the age of 21 years of age, and no person under 18 may serve or sell intoxicating liquor. So the business was issued 2 administrative citations for the failed compliance checks, both of which have been paid, and the 2 criminal cases are complete and closed. It has been the City Council's practice to review the establishment's business license when there are 2 failed compliance checks within a 12-month period to consider what, if any, action should be taken against the license. A letter was mailed to the Burger Bar informing them of the possible action against their license and inviting them for the opportunity to speak to the City Council. I believe they are here tonight. So the City Council's authority ranges from no action against the liquor license, suspension of the license for a specified number of days determined by the City Council, or revocation of their liquor license. Just to let you know, past council practice in response to 2 failed compliance checks involved a temporary suspension of an establishment's license for a number of time. That was back in 2013. The city council then did suspend Lifetime's license for 7 days. Should you wish to do that, staff is not making a recommendation to you on one way or the other, but we did prepare a resolution for consideration if you do wish to take any action, suspension. So there is a resolution in your packet if you wish to do that. So as I said, the owners are here tonight. They did also meet with the city clerk previously or last week to share their corrective course of action and prevention for both establishments. So they also own Ingredients Cafe. And that information is outlined in your attached packet. They have been, as I said, they have paid their citations, they have met with staff, and they have begun corrective actions. So they're here if you want to hear from them or if you want to discuss this at the council level. And the city clerk and I can stand for questions.
Well, I think before the council jumps in, if you're here, Mr. Pratt, if you want to step forward, if you want to speak to this issue, please. And just for the record, state your name and address. And
Mayor, members of the council, my name is Len Pratt. I live at 301 Wildwood Avenue in Birchwood, Minnesota.
My name is Ben Pratt, and I live at 507 Salem Court, Matamidi, Minnesota.
If I could just take a minute and just review what it is I put in our package and what steps we have taken. Ben and I are partners in the restaurants. As mentioned, 18 years at Ingredients. And 5 years at Burger Bar. Actually, Burger Bar is a building that you guys own, the city owns. And we undertook the project to renew it and make it a burger establishment. We completely understand, the seriousness of the matter, and we wish to demonstrate the steps that we've undertaken to remedy it. Enclosed, I included 5 components that our new updated 2023 Burger Bar serving alcohol policy is. It has come to our attention, should come to your attention, that after 18 years of doing this at Ingredients and 5 years at the Burger Bar, we understand, once again, the seriousness of this. We have employed literally hundreds of staff in all these years, and in many cases served beverages with the meals, And with all the people coming and going, making certain that they all absolutely know the policies is something now that we have formally taken steps to do. And here in attendance is Casey Morton, who works for me at Pratt Homes. And I'm proud to say, after 50 years of being here in the White Bear Lake area as a home builder, Casey is now working for me as an administrator. And she comes with beverage serving and actually alcoholic beverage sales before she came to work for me for Pratt Homes. She has agreed to become our serving alcohol enforcement administrator. Okay? So bottom line, anybody that comes to work at Ingredients or Burger Bar is going to have to meet with our enforcement administrator, reviewing with them formally, the law and the policies and how serious this is. In addition to this, I know I don't want to go on and on here, but we did, all of us, take formal training on Saturday, 3 hours, with a firm Robert Poplum, who has worked in the capacity of a trainer for serving alcohol, not only here in the state of Minnesota, but nationally. He understands, what goes on when someone comes in to an establishment and wants to have an alcoholic beverage. The kind of license that they show you. What is a fake license? How to identify both sides of the card. And it goes on and on and on. But all of that is our job to do. We have to formally train our staff to understand what this is. And that was a very productive 3 hours. I feel informed myself to a higher degree than I've ever been. And I know you've been talking about cannabis here too, and I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but we did touch on that. And I don't want to get off on a tangent, but at some point when you make your, the ordinances and so on, we're going to have to somehow understand what that is when someone is beyond what I'll call serving limits. Okay. Each of our employees has now signed our Good Table Restaurant Group alcohol service policy. It's formally been done, and it's now in our policy manual. So the explanation of what all this is has been done, and I appreciate each person that was in attendance actually now has a certificate as well that they can take with them, no matter where they go. We are asking, I guess, just to have us, this has not been our practice, and I understand that I guess I'm asking for us to give us a chance to prove it. First step is taken, and it'll be ongoing when someone new comes. Ben, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just in regards to both restaurants, both of them close at 8 o'clock at night. We're heavily food focused. Ingredients is a little different than Burger Bar, where Burger Bar represents about 95% of our sales is straight food. So it's not like it's I don't know if anybody's ever been in there, but it's not like a bar, it's just beer, and we have some wine, and people don't necessarily come in there just like to drink or whatever. They have a beer with their burger, and that was the intent, the design of the place, and in regards to the failed compliance, the person checking the ID did ask for an ID, but didn't do the proper calculation of the birth date. So it's not like we have this philosophy there where let's, shell out the beers and whatever and get those sales up. That's not, has never been the intention, nor have I ever said that to anybody. And I'm a food guy. 95% of my concern is on food safety and the process of making a plate of food for folks and keeping track of that and keeping it healthy and safe and clean. And after going through the training on Saturday, it kind of really opened my eyes to the different legalities of all this, and it's somewhat scary, and so that's kind of what I have to say about.
So he's food, and now we've got alcoholic beverages. Okay, so not leaving it up just to chance, but to actually formally establish a staff person that's going to monitor any new hires. Sure. And after going through the training, one final note.
Len, can you step up?
One final note after going through the training, and I mentioned this, and thank you for meeting with us. It wouldn't hurt, I think, at some point along the line, is to have formal training for the city, any alcoholic beverage service business, bars, especially now we start going into cannabis, to actually provide a place where people can come anybody serving alcohol, businesses or cannabis, actually have a kind of a one time a year kind of a review of the law. And whether that works or not, I know we're going to do it internally, but it would be nice to share that expense and actually include that in our general White Bear Lake area to have a consistent enforcement. So anyway, thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. To me, the conclusion on this is pretty simple, and I'll get to that in a second. So first off, I have every confidence in the world that you're taking this seriously. We looked through all the literature that you provided. There's clearly training. You've appointed staff. I don't think this is anything where you're sweeping under the rug. Now, the problem I have is balancing that with the fact that there are many, many other bars that did pass the compliance. They didn't fail twice in a row. And if we don't enforce the law, it has no teeth. So I'll just say an absolute revocation I don't think is at all appropriate. I think that would be too extreme and it would deviate from our past practice. I also think no action at all would be insufficient and would deviate from our past practice. The good news is this has only happened one other time, and it was almost a decade ago, or it was about a decade ago. So that's good. We don't have a significant problem. And by your own admission, you're not heavily reliant on beer sales. You're primarily selling burgers, and I think you noted 95% versus 5%. The economics, to me, have less of a bearing, but that's at least a factor. So having said all that, I think it's a fair a punishment, if you will, because there were, in fact, two compliance failures, and we're talking about serving minors, serving underage individuals alcohol. I think a 7-day suspension is reasonable and appropriate. I don't think it's going to be, anything that's going to put you under, but I think it'll hammer home the message, and it'll make it clear to every other bar that we do take this seriously. So we have a resolution before the council that sets forth a 7-day period revocation of the liquor license. I think that's reasonable. I think it's appropriate. I think that's as far as we need to go. And I would, that's where I stand, and I would recommend that the council pass that resolution. And with that, I will open it up to council for your thoughts. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there are two establishments that are, and I believe that the license covers both establishments, or do they have individuals? So the suggestion is 7-day suspension for the burger bar, but not affecting ingredients.
Correct.
Because there was no violations. I'm inclined to support that.
Councilmember Jones.
So while last time this happened, I was on the council, I wanted more from Lifetime, because Lifetime didn't do any of what you did. Zero. Nothing. No addressing, just took up and they took their suspension and they didn't give to you-know-what, to either way. And while I appreciate that, what bothers me the most is I get the first, the underage to the underage. Sorry, you don't get a free pass on that without, no. The person's underage selling to an underage. That one bothers me within the two. And we do have Mr. Pratt, I really appreciate this, I do, but I'm with the mayor is that we have other problems, other folks that A, did it right, and B, need to keep doing it right. But I'm good with the 7-day.
Anyone else on the council have a thought on this? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the resolution we have before us, which would impose a 7-day revocation of the liquor license.
Revocation.
Suspension.
And the suspension at Burger Bar.
It's only for Burger Bar, correct, because they're two separate licenses. And just for clarification, that would run August 20th through August 26th, 2023.
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Councilmember Hughes.
I just have one clarification question. This was from I just have one clarification, because you said these were in a row. Didn't we have a compliance check in like March-ish, and were they not on that?
Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, it is, I assume they were, it is 12 consecutive months.
Sure, just wanted that. So in theory, they passed the one, but not those other two.
Yes.
And I, raw. But I support the resolution. We have laws and we have consequences, and it's hard to have one without the other.
Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The resolution is adopted in 7 days and back in business. All good? All right. Thank you.
They're still in business, right? They can sell burgers. 95% of the business.
I was referring to the beer business. I don't know
Oh,
if it
I'm-
needs
I'm
clarification
just-
to
I'm
that
just-
level.
No, I was more just commenting.
Item 9, discussion. We have nothing scheduled. Item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms.
Thank you.
Crawford.
Mayor, members of the council, a few things. So as most of you know, we had the Lakewood Hills All Ability Playground ribbon cutting last week. It was wonderful. It was so hot, but it was a wonderful turnout. Public Safety and Public Works provided popsicles in the park. And again, just thank you to the Lions Club for making that playground a reality, and our Public Works staff for playing a big part in executing that. So significant contributions came from the Lions Club International and Game Time and TA Shifsky and Sons. So I just wanted to again call that out. So thank you for attending those that did. And then an announcement, Administrative Captain Dale Hager was promoted to the Chief of Police. He will assume that role on August 28th, after Chief Swanson's last day is August 25th. A couple of upcoming events, Fridays with Firefighters. The last one for this summer is Thursday, August 18th from 10 to noon at the South Fire Station. And we have a car seat clinic with Regents Hospital Tuesday, August 22nd from 4 to 7 p.m. at the South Fire Station. Registration is required for that one, and that is on the screen. So that's what I have tonight. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Crawford? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Especially for how someone was. Me.
What, all of us, I think?
No, that discussion was like over the 4 things. Have a good night. It was all interrelated, so it was like,
Yeah.
I like airing that stuff out.
We got deeper than we probably would have wanted to go, but I figured because you